For an instant that lasted both forever and no time at all, Admiral Sarah Chun felt herself existing in multiple timelines simultaneously. In one, the human fleet was being systematically erased from history, their very existence deleted from the cosmic record. In another, they had never left Earth, never challenged the Council, never discovered their potential. In a third, humanity had never evolved at all, leaving Earth as a barren rock spinning endlessly around its star. But in the timeline that mattered most, the one where humanity refused to accept defeat, Sarah Chun opened her eyes and found herself still standing on the bridge of the HLF Vengeance. "Report," she snapped, her mind instantly shifting from existential terror to tactical analysis. "Temporal shielding held," reported Dr. Vasquez from her station, though her voice carried undertones of amazement. "The quantum consciousness anchors we developed during Project Ascension somehow protected us from timeline erasure. Around them, space itself was still rippling from the aftereffects of the Council's impossible weapon. Several human ships had been caught in the temporal disruption field and were flickering in and out of existence as their crews struggled to maintain coherence across multiple probability streams. Supreme Chancellor Vexera's voice crackled across the communication channel, carrying a mixture of surprise and growing fury. "Impossible. No species has ever resisted the Chronos disruptor. How did you? We learned something during our exile that you've forgotten in all your millennia of rule," Sarah interrupted. "We learned that impossible is just another word for something that hasn't been accomplished yet." The truth was more complex than Sarah's defiant words suggested. Humanity's resistance to the temporal weapon wasn't just a result of their technology. It was a consequence of their fundamental approach to existence itself. While the Council species had spent centuries perfecting static technologies and rigid hierarchies, humanity had developed something far more valuable: adaptability. The Ascension Project had enhanced human consciousness to operate across multiple quantum states simultaneously, allowing their minds to maintain coherence even when their physical bodies were subjected to temporal manipulation. It was an accidental discovery during Dr. Vasquez's research into psychic immunity, but it had just saved the entire human fleet from erasure. "All ships," Sarah broadcast on the fleet frequency, "implement Phoenix Formation 7. Time to show the Chancellor what we've really been working on." The human fleet began to move in patterns that defied conventional space combat doctrine. Ships that had been scattered across the system suddenly seemed to be everywhere at once, their quantum-fold drives allowing them to exist in multiple locations simultaneously until they chose which reality to collapse into. But it wasn't just the technology that was revolutionary, it was the tactical philosophy behind it. While the Council fought to preserve their existing order, humanity fought to create new possibilities. Their entire military doctrine was based on the principle that any situation could be changed if you approached it from the right angle. The HLF Phoenix, under the command of Captain James Morrison, demonstrated this philosophy by doing something that violated every known law of physics and warfare. As the Council's super dreadnought targeted her with its main batteries, the Phoenix split into 17 separate vessels, each one fully functional and individually capable of sustained combat. Multidimensional existence projection, Dr. Vasquez explained to the stunned Council forces monitoring their communications. "We've learned to exist in multiple realities simultaneously and choose which one becomes primary based on tactical advantage." Supreme Chancellor Vexera watched her supposedly invincible super dreadnought come under attack from enemies that shouldn't have been able to exist. Her ancient mind struggled to process combat reports that made no sense according to any known scientific principles. "Sir," her tactical officer reported, "the human vessels are phasing through our shield harmonics. They appear to be attacking us from inside our own defensive perimeter." "How is that possible?" "Baxara demanda." "Unknown, sir. Their ships are registering as existing in the same physical space as our own vessels, but without any collision or interference. It's as if they exist in parallel dimensions that occasionally overlap with ours. The battle was unlike anything in galactic history. The Council fleet, armed with weapons that could shatter planets and erase timelines, found themselves unable to effectively target an enemy that existed according to entirely different rules of reality. Meanwhile, the human ships struck with surgical precision, their weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. "Why aren't they trying to kill us?" asked the commander of the hegemony battle cruiser Eternal Vengeance, as his ship's weapon systems were systematically neutralized by attacks that came from impossible angles. His answer came from an unexpected source: Captain Maria Santos of the HLF Retribution, whose ship had somehow materialized inside the Council vessel's shield perimeter. "Because we're not the monsters here," she said, her image appearing on the hegemony ship's communication screens. "We're fighting to liberate the galaxy, not to rule it through fear." As if to demonstrate her point, the human weapons that had disabled the Eternal Vengeance's offensive capabilities were designed to leave life support and defensive systems intact. The Council crew was helpless but unharmed, able to observe the battle but unable to participate. This restraint was having an unexpected effect on the Council forces. Crews who had been taught that humanity was a chaotic plague upon galactic civilization were discovering that their supposed enemies were fighting according to principles of honor that their own leaders had abandoned centuries ago. "Sir," the communications officer aboard Supreme Chancellor Vexera's flagship reported, "we're receiving surrender offers from 17 of our escort vessels. Their crews are requesting asylum with the human forces." Vexera's compound eyes widened in disbelief. Not just defeat, desertion. Her own forces were abandoning the Council cause in the middle of battle. "This is impossible," she muttered. "The loyalty conditioning should prevent such behavior." "Unless," came Dr. Vasquez's voice from the human fleet, "your loyalty conditioning doesn't work on beings whose consciousness has been enhanced beyond your ability to manipulate." The truth hit Vexera like a physical blow. The human technological broadcast hadn't just included weapon designs and faster-than-light travel specifications. They had included consciousness enhancement techniques that made beings immune to the psychic control systems that formed the foundation of Council authority. Every crew member who had accessed the human data, every scientist who had studied their theories, every engineer who had examined their designs had been subtly altered. Not controlled or dominated, but liberated from the mental conditioning that had kept them loyal to a system that suppressed their potential. "You've infected the entire galaxy," Vexera said with growing horror. "We've immunized it," Sarah replied, "against tyranny, against stagnation, and against the fear of change that has held civilization back for millennia." As the battle continued, the scope of humanity's strategy became clear. This wasn't just a military campaign to defeat the Council. It was a comprehensive program to transform galactic civilization itself. Every engagement, every technological broadcast, every moment of contact between human and alien forces was designed to spread ideas that were more dangerous to authoritarian rule than any weapon. But Supreme Chancellor Vexera had not ruled the galaxy for 2,000 years without learning when to escalate beyond all reasonable limits. If conventional warfare and temporal weapons couldn't defeat the human threat, then she would employ the ultimate sanction. "Activate the Stellar Lancet," she commanded. Her tactical officers exchanged glances of alarm. The Stellar Lancet was a weapon that had never been used, even during the war against the Ascended. It was a device capable of triggering a chain reaction that could destroy entire star systems and everything in them. "Chancellor," her chief science officer said carefully, "deployment of the Stellar Lancet in an inhabited system would result in the extinction of all life within a 50-light-year radius. The death toll would be measured in trillions. Acceptabla lusas, baxara rablia aculdli." Better to rule over a smaller galaxy than to lose control entirely. The weapon emerged from the superdreadnought's core like a flower of death, its crystalline structure glowing with energies that made nearby space itself ripple with instability. Targeting sensors locked onto the Keth system's primary star preparing to turn it into a supernova that would sterilize dozens of worlds. But humanity had not survived exile, defeated overwhelming odds, and liberated half the galaxy by failing to plan for the worst-case scenario. Dr. Vasquez, Sarah said calmly, implement Lazarus Protocol. Are you certain? Elena asked. Once we activate Lazarus, there's no going back. We'll be crossing a line that even the Council hasn't dared to approach. Sarah looked around at her crew, seeing the same determination in their faces that had carried humanity through 3 centuries of struggle against impossible odds. They've made the choice for us. Do it. Throughout the Keth system and across 17 others that humanity had liberated, ancient artifacts that had been carefully placed months earlier began to activate. These were not weapons in any conventional sense. They were something far more radical. Consciousness amplifiers designed to awaken the dormant potential that existed within every intelligent species in the galaxy. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. On every council world within 100 light years, billions of beings suddenly found their mental capabilities enhanced beyond anything they had ever experienced. Scientists who had struggled with basic equations suddenly understood the fundamental nature of reality itself. Artists who had created within narrow, approved guidelines found themselves envisioning possibilities that transcended physical limitations. But, most importantly, every enhanced being gained the ability to perceive truth directly, to see through the lies, manipulations, and conditioning that had kept them obedient to council authority for millennia. What have you done? Supreme Chancellor Vexera screamed as reports flooded in from across her empire. Mass uprisings were erupting on every council world simultaneously as billions of newly awakened beings rejected the system that had suppressed their potential. We've given the galaxy what you've always feared most, Sarah replied. Choice. Real choice. Made by beings who can see clearly what you've taken from them. The stellar lancet fired. For a moment, it seemed that Vexera's desperation had succeeded. The weapon's exotic energies struck the Keth system's star and began the chain reaction that would turn it into a supernova. But the humans had prepared for even this ultimate escalation. As the star began to collapse, massive devices hidden within its corona activated. Not shields or weapons, but something far more audacious. Stellar engineering equipment that began to redirect and control the supernova itself. Instead of exploding outward in an uncontrolled burst of destruction, the star's death became a precisely controlled release of energy. The radiation that should have sterilized 50 star systems was channeled through dimensional portals, emerging in the empty void between galaxies where it could harm the communication array deep beneath the Rocky Mountains buzzed with activity as the final countdown began. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before a wall of monitors that displayed data streams from every corner of Earth's transformed interior. As the lead architect of Project Sunburst, she had spent the better part of her adult life turning humanity's home into something that could challenge the stars themselves. Status report from all sectors, she commanded, her voice echoing through the cavernous controls center carved from solid granite 2 miles beneath the surface. Sector Alpha reports full power synchronization, called out Dr. James Parr from his position at the central command console. All gravitational manipulation arrays are online and stable. Sector Beta confirms quantum field generators are at maximum output, reported Dr. Sarah Ibn Rashid. The dimensional fold initiators are responding perfectly to remote commands. One by one, the reports came in from research stations that had once been independent facilities scattered across the globe. CERN, Fermilab, the Large Synchrotron Collider in Japan, dozens of other installations that have been connected by tunnels and converted into components of humanity's ultimate defense system. Magnificent, breathed Dr. Vasquez, watching as the energy readings climbed toward the theoretical limits that her team had calculated years earlier. After 50 years of preparation, it's finally working exactly as designed. The irony wasn't lost on her that humanity's greatest scientific achievement was also potentially their swan song. Project Sunburst represented the pinnacle of human engineering and theoretical physics, but it could only be used once, and using it would likely cost them everything they had built on Earth's surface. Dr. Vasquez called out Lieutenant Colonel Harrison from the military liaison station. We're receiving telemetry from our orbital observation posts. The Kethran fleet is holding position at the system's edge, but they're not moving to withdraw. We have 37 minutes until activation deadline. Elena nodded grimly. She had always known this moment might come, the point where humanity would have to prove that their threats weren't empty bluster. The Kethrans had built their empire on the assumption that conquered species would choose survival over freedom. Today, they would learn how wrong that assumption could be. Communications, give me a direct line to General Chun at Strategic Command, she ordered. Within moments, the face of Earth's supreme military commander appeared on the main display. Behind Chun, the Strategic Command bunker showed the same controlled chaos of preparation that filled Elena's own facility. Doctor, what's our status? Chun asked without preamble. All systems show green across the board. We're ready to execute on your command. Elena paused, studying the general's weathered features. Sarah, are we really going to do this? That depends on the Kethrans, Chun replied. But, yes, if they force our hand, we'll carry through. We've come too far and sacrificed too much to back down now. Elena understood the weight behind those words. The transformation of Earth had required resources and cooperation on a scale never before achieved in human history. Every nation had contributed their best scientists and engineers. Entire economies had been reorganized to support the project. Cities had been rebuilt underground while the surface installations were constructed. The old world of competing nations had given way to a unified species with a single goal: ensuring that humanity would never be enslaved. Have we heard anything from the deep shelters? Elena asked. All population centers report ready for extended isolation. Food, water, air recycling, power, everything needed to sustain our people for decades if necessary. They know what's at stake. The deep shelters were perhaps humanity's greatest achievement outside of the weapon itself. Connected by a network of tunnels that span continents, they could house Earth's entire population in safety even if the planet's surface was completely sterilized. Geothermal power plants provided energy, underground farms have been carved from bedrock, and vast databases contain the sum total of human knowledge and culture. Elena, Chun continued, I need to know, are you absolutely certain the weapon will work as designed? Dr. Vasquez looked at the readouts streaming across her displays. 50 years of theoretical work, 30 years of construction, 20 years of testing and refinement. The mathematics were elegant, the engineering was sound, and the energy curves matched their projections perfectly. General, based on our calculations and simulations, Project Sunburst will convert approximately 60% of Earth's mass into directed gravitational energy. The resulting pulse will propagate at near-light speed and will completely disintegrate any artificial structure within a 2 light-hour radius. Natural bodies like asteroids will be unaffected due to their quantum resonance patterns, but manufactured objects, ships, stations, weapons platforms will be reduced to constituent atoms. She paused, looking at the blue curve on her main display that represented their planet's fate. The weapon will also crack Earth like an egg and probably throw us out of our current orbit. But the deep shelters are designed to survive planetary breakup, and our population will live to rebuild elsewhere if necessary. Understood, Chun replied. And there's absolutely no way to limit the weapon's effects to just the Kethran fleet? None. The gravitational pulse can't distinguish between friendly and enemy targets. Any human vessels in the outer system will be destroyed along with the Kethrans. That's why we recalled all our ships to underground hangars. The weight of that decision still haunted Elena. Humanity's small space fleet, mining vessels, research ships, the few exploration craft they had managed to build, all had been sacrificed to ensure that Project Sunburst could operate without interference. When the weapon fired, humanity would be temporarily reduced to a purely planetary civilization. Dr. Vasquez interrupted Dr. Park. I'm reading some unusual activity from the Kethrin fleet. They're launching smaller craft. Looks like reconnaissance drones heading our way. Elena switched her display to show the incoming contacts. Dozens of small objects were accelerating away from the alien fleet, clearly intended to gather close-range intelligence on Earth's defenses. "Time to intercept?" she asked. "Approximately 18 minutes," reported the tracking officer. "They're fast, much faster than anything in our databases." "General Chun, are you seeing this?" "Confirmed, Doctor. It looks like they're probing our capabilities, probably trying to determine if our threats are real." Elena felt a chill run through her. If the Kethrins got detailed sensor readings of Project Sunburst, they might find a way to counter it. The weapon's effectiveness depended partly on surprise. The aliens had to be close enough when it fired, and they had to be caught off guard by the nature of the attack. "Can we intercept those drones?" she asked. "Negative," Chen replied. "Our few remaining orbital platforms aren't designed for anti-ship operations, and we can't risk revealing their positions by firing on the drones. Then, we have to assume the Kethrins will learn everything they need to know about our setup," Elena concluded. "The question is whether that knowledge will help them." Dr. Ibn Rashid looked up from her console. "Actually, it might not matter what they learn. According to our models, gravitational pulse weapons operate outside the normal parameters of electromagnetic defense systems. Their shields and armor are designed to stop energy beams and kinetic projectiles. They probably don't have any protection against directed gravitational fields." "Probably isn't certainly," Elena muttered. In her years of scientific work, she had learned to be suspicious of any theory that hadn't been tested in practice. They were about to test the most powerful weapon ever conceived, and they would only get one chance to see if it worked. Dr. Vasquez called out the communications officer. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Lunar Observatory. They report that the Kethrin reconnaissance drones have just achieved close Earth orbit and are conducting detailed scans." Elena pulled up the feed from humanity's hidden observation post on the moon's far side. The small facility, disguised as a natural crater, had been monitoring the alien fleet since their arrival. Now its cameras showed the sleek forms of Kethrin drones racing through Earth's orbital space, their sensors probing every inch of the planet's electromagnetic signature. "How long until they complete their scans?" she asked. "At their current rate, perhaps 5 minutes," reported the lunar station commander. "Doctor, they're being very thorough. Whatever they're looking for, they want detailed information." Elena watched the alien craft weaving between Earth's few remaining satellites, their movements precise and purposeful. Each drone was larger than most human spacecraft, and their sensor arrays were clearly far more advanced than anything humanity possessed. If there were weaknesses in Project Sunburst design, the Kethrins would find them. "General Chun, we need to make a decision," Elena said. "If we're going to activate the weapon, it should be now, before they complete their reconnaissance." "Understood, but we gave them a deadline. Moving up the schedule could be seen as treachery, and that might affect how other species view humanity in the future." Elena considered this carefully. Even if Project Sunburst succeeded in destroying the Kethrin fleet, humanity would eventually have to deal with the rest of the galaxy. Their reputation for honor and keeping their word might be crucial to future diplomatic relations. "You're right," she agreed. "We stick to the timeline. But we need to be ready for the possibility that they'll use the next 20 minutes to prepare countermeasures." On her displays, the energy buildup within Earth's core continued to climb toward the critical threshold. The gravitational manipulation arrays buried throughout the planet's crust were drawing power from fusion reactors, antimatter containment units, and even carefully controlled black holes that humanity had learned to create and maintain. It was a testament to human ingenuity that they had managed to harness such forces without destroying themselves in the process. "Dr. Park, what's our power efficiency curve looking like?" Elena asked. "Excellent, actually. We're running about 3% above our best-case projections. All the years of refinement and optimization really paid off." He paused, studying his readouts more carefully. "Dr. Vasquez, at current power levels, our effective range might be greater than originally calculated. How much greater? Potentially up to 3 light hours instead of 2. The gravitational field coherence is maintaining better than expected as it propagates. Elena felt a moment of professional pride, even amid the approaching crisis. Her team had designed something that was working better than their most optimistic projections. If only they were building it for exploration rather than defense. Dr. Vasquez interrupted the communications officer. The Kethran drones are completing their scans and withdrawing to their fleet. We're also receiving a transmission from Admiral Zexthor. Put him through. The familiar form of the Kethran commander appeared on the main display, his alien features set in what Elena had learned to recognize as deep contemplation. Dr. Vasquez, the Admiral began, I assume you are the chief architect of this Project Sunburst that your leaders have described. I am, Elena replied simply. Then, you understand the physics involved better than anyone on your planet. Tell me truthfully, will your weapon work as advertised? Elena studied the alien commander carefully. There was something in his posture, in the tone of his translated words, that suggested genuine curiosity rather than an attempt to gather intelligence. Admiral, based on 50 years of theoretical development and 30 years of practical construction, I can state with confidence that Project Sunburst will perform exactly as we have described. Your fleet will be completely destroyed if you remain in this system when we activate the weapon. And your planet will likely be uninhabitable on the surface for centuries. But humanity will survive in our deep shelters, and we will rebuild. Admiral Zexthor was silent for several long moments, apparently processing this information. Dr. Vasquez, I have been a military commander for over 40 standard years. In that time, I have conquered dozens of worlds and defeated hundreds of enemy fleets. But I have never encountered a species willing to sacrifice their homeworld simply to deny us victory. Then, you've never encountered a species that truly valued freedom, Elena replied. Perhaps not. The Admiral's mandibles clicked in what Elena had learned was a sign of deep thought among Kethrans. Doctor, my reconnaissance drones have completed detailed scans of your planet. The energy signatures they detected are remarkable. Your species has achieved something that our best scientists believed was purely theoretical. Are you planning to withdraw? Elena asked directly. That depends on your answer to one question. If I order my fleet to leave this system immediately, will you allow us to depart unmolested? Elena felt her heart skip a beat. Was the Admiral actually considering retreat? After decades of preparation for this moment, was it possible that the Kethrans would simply leave? Admiral, if your fleet begins immediate withdrawal and maintains course toward the edge of our system, we will not activate Project Sunburst. You have my word as both a scientist and a human being. The word of a human being, Admiral Zexthor repeated slowly. What value does such a thing have in the greater galaxy? The same value as the word of any being capable of honor, Elena replied. We keep our promises, Admiral. That's something your empire might want to remember. The transmission ended, leaving Elena and her team in tense silence. Around them, the displays continued to show Project Sunburst building toward critical activation levels. The weapon could be fired at any moment, and yet now there was a chance, however small, that it might not be necessary. General Chun, Elena called out. Did you monitor that conversation? Every word, Doctor. What's your assessment? He's considering withdrawal, but he hasn't committed yet. We should maintain readiness for full activation while hoping for the best. Dr. Park looked up from his console. Dr. Vasquez, I'm reading massive electromagnetic activity from the Kethran fleet. It looks like they're powering up their engines, either for attack or retreat. Can you determine which? Not from this distance, but the energy patterns are consistent with preparation for major fleet maneuvers. Elena stared at her displays, watching the two most powerful forces in the solar system preparing for either combat or withdrawal. Somewhere above them, 300 Kethran warships were making final preparations for whatever their admiral decided. Here beneath Earth's surface, The most powerful weapon ever created was reaching the moment when it could reshape the fate of both civilizations. "How much time until deadline?" she asked. 14 minutes, reported Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. 14 minutes to determine whether humanity's greatest gamble would end in glorious victory or necessary sacrifice. Elena had spent most of her adult life working toward this moment, and now that it was here, she found herself hoping that all her work would prove unnecessary. "Dr. Vasquez," called out the communications officer, "we're receiving multiple transmissions from the deep shelters. Population centers worldwide are requesting status updates." "Tell them we're approaching the decision point," Elena replied. "All systems are operational, and we're maintaining full readiness." "And tell them," she paused, thinking about the billions of people waiting in their underground sanctuaries. "Tell them that whatever happens in the next few minutes, humanity will survive. We made sure of that." Above them, the Kethran fleet continued its ominous preparations while Earth's ultimate defense system powered toward the moment of truth. The next few minutes would determine whether the galaxy would remember this day as humanity's first great victory or their final, defiant stand against the forces of conquest. The countdown continued, and with each passing second, the stakes grew higher for both civilizations. Admiral Zex Thor stood motionless on the bridge of the Dominus Rex, his four eyes studying the tactical displays that surrounded him. The reconnaissance data from their drone sweep painted a picture that challenged everything he thought he knew about military engineering. The humans had somehow managed to convert their entire planet into a weapon system that defied conventional understanding. "Analysis complete, Admiral," reported Science Officer Texmar, his young voice barely concealing his amazement. "The energy readings are beyond anything in our databases. They've somehow managed to create a network of gravitational manipulation devices that span their entire planet. The power requirements alone should have been impossible for a pre-spaceflight civilization." "Elaborate," Zex Thor commanded, though he suspected he wasn't going to like what he heard. "Sir, based on our scans, the humans have constructed a series of facilities that appear to use controlled quantum black holes as power sources. These are connected to a planetary network of what can only be described as gravitational field generators. The entire system is designed to convert planetary mass directly into directed energy." Commander Yexel stepped forward, his ancient armor creaking with the movement. "Texmar, are you saying that their planet is literally a weapon?" "More than that, sir. It's the largest weapon ever constructed. If our calculations are correct, the energy output from their Project Sunburst would be equivalent to the simultaneous detonation of approximately 50,000 antimatter warheads." The bridge fell silent except for the low hum of the ship's systems. Admiral Zex Thor felt something he hadn't experienced since his early days as a junior officer: genuine uncertainty about the outcome of a battle. "Defensive options?" he asked quietly. "Unknown, sir," Texmar replied. "Our shields are designed to deflect energy beams and absorb kinetic impacts. Gravitational pulse weapons operate on entirely different principles. We have no data on how our defensive systems would respond to directed gravitational fields. Could we survive such an attack?" The young science officer hesitated before answering. "Admiral, based on the energy levels we detected, I doubt any artificial structure within their weapons range would survive intact. The gravitational forces involved would literally tear apart the molecular bonds holding our ships together." Admiral Zex Thor moved to the main viewport and stared out at the blue-white marble of Earth. Such a small world, and yet its inhabitants had found a way to threaten the most powerful fleet in Kethran space. The irony was almost overwhelming. "Sir," called out Lieutenant Vextai from the communication station, "we're receiving a priority transmission from High Command." "Display it." Supreme Marshal Kextan appeared on the bridge's main hologram, his cybernetic eyes glowing with their usual cold intensity. Behind him, Admiral Zex Thor could see the war room of the Kethran High Command, filled with tactical displays and communication arrays. "Admiral, what is your status?" "Our long-range sensors show significant energy buildups in the target system, but You have not reported beginning assault operations. Supreme Marshal, Zexthor replied carefully. We have encountered a situation that requires strategic consideration. The target species possesses capabilities that were not indicated in our initial reconnaissance. Explain. Admiral Zexthor gestured toward the tactical display showing Earth wreathed in energy signatures. The humans have converted their homeworld into a weapon system capable of generating directed gravitational pulses. According to our analysis, this weapon could destroy our entire fleet. For a moment, the Marshal's expression remained unchanged. Then his cybernetic eyes flared brighter as he processed the implications. Admiral, are you suggesting that a primitive species poses a genuine threat to the Seventh Fleet? I am stating that they possess a weapon capable of destroying any artificial structure within a radius of several light hours. Our ships, their stations, any technological construct within range would be completely annihilated. Impossible, declared another voice from off-screen. Admiral Zexthor recognized the tone of Grand Admiral Kexran, the Empire's chief military strategist. No pre-spaceflight species could develop such capabilities. With respect, Grand Admiral, Zexthor replied, the evidence is conclusive. Our science teams have verified the readings multiple times. The humans have achieved something that our own scientists considered theoretical at best. Supreme Marshal Kextan leaned forward in his command chair, his ancient features set in deep concentration. Admiral, in 3 centuries of expansion, the Kethran Empire has never encountered a species capable of threatening our fleets. Are you certain of your assessment? Completely certain, sir. Moreover, the humans have demonstrated a willingness to sacrifice their homeworld rather than submit to conquest. They are preparing to activate their weapon in... He glanced at the countdown display. Approximately 8 minutes. 8 minutes, the Marshal repeated slowly. And if they carry through with their threat, the Seventh Fleet will cease to exist, Supreme Marshal. The silence from High Command stretched for nearly a full minute. Admiral Zexthor could see other figures moving in the background of the transmission. The highest levels of Kethra Military Command were clearly engaged in urgent consultation. Finally, Supreme Marshal Kextan spoke again. Admiral, in your professional opinion, what are our options? 3 possibilities, sir. First, we could immediately withdraw to safe range and reassess our approach. Second, we could attempt to rush their planet and hope to destroy their weapon before they can activate it. Third, we could call their bluff and assume they won't actually sacrifice their world. Assessment of each option. Admiral Zexthor had been considering exactly these possibilities for the past hour. Withdrawal guarantees the survival of our fleet, but represents the first time in Imperial history that we've retreated from a primitive species. A rushed attack might succeed, but our approach would take several hours, and they could activate their weapon at any time during that period. As for calling their bluff, he paused. Sir, I don't believe they're bluffing. Elaborate. In my examination of their communications and behavior, I see no indication of deception. Their preparations are real, their weapon is operational, and their leadership appears genuinely committed to using it if necessary. These beings value their freedom more than their lives. Grand Admiral Kexran's voice came from off-screen again. Admiral Zexthor, you're describing a species that would commit racial suicide rather than accept conquest. Such behavior is not rational. Respectfully, Grand Admiral, rationality is defined by one's priorities. If a species values freedom above survival, then sacrificing their world to preserve that freedom becomes a rational choice. Supreme Marshal Kextan raised one of his cybernetic hands for silence. Admiral, what is your recommendation? The question hung in the space between Earth and the distant Kethran homeworld, carrying with it the weight of imperial policy and military doctrine that had guided the Empire for centuries. Admiral Zexthor knew that his answer would either confirm or shatter the foundation upon which Kethran expansion had been built. Sir, I recommend immediate withdrawal to safe range, he said finally. The risk to our fleet is unacceptable, and the tactical situation offers no clear path to victory without massive losses. "You're recommending retreat," came another voice from High Command. "The Seventh Fleet, which has never known defeat, should flee from a single primitive planet." "I'm recommending tactical wisdom," Admiral Zextor replied firmly. "A destroyed fleet serves no purpose to the Empire. A preserved fleet can fight again under more favorable circumstances." "And what circumstances would those be?" demanded Grand Admiral Kexran. "If this species possesses such capabilities, how could we ever hope to defeat them?" "Perhaps defeat isn't the appropriate goal, Grand Admiral. Perhaps we should consider alternative approaches." The words left Admiral Zexthor's mouth before he fully realized their implications. He had just suggested that the Kethran Empire consider something other than conquest in dealing with another species, an idea that bordered on heresy within imperial doctrine. "Alternative approaches," Supreme Marshal Kextan repeated slowly. "Are you suggesting diplomatic relations with a primitive species?" "I'm suggesting that we reconsider our definition of primitive, sir. A species capable of converting their homeworld into a strategic weapon can hardly be dismissed as technologically inferior." Lieutenant Vextai interrupted from her station. "Admiral, we're receiving another transmission from the human leadership. Display it alongside our communication with High Command," Zexthor ordered. The bridge hologram split, showing both the Kethran High Command and a new figure from Earth's surface. This time, it was an elderly human male wearing elaborate ceremonial clothing that Admiral Zexthor recognized as formal diplomatic attire. "Admiral Zexthor," the human began, "I am Ambassador Chunwei, Special Representative for Interstellar Affairs. I'm transmitting this message with the authorization of our world government, and with the full understanding that our deadline approaches." The ambassador paused, his weathered features reflecting both sadness and determination. "Admiral, we want you to understand that we take no pleasure in the situation that has developed. Humanity has always preferred negotiation to conflict, cooperation to conquest. But we will not permit our species to be enslaved, regardless of the cost." "What are you proposing?" Admiral Zexthor asked. "We're offering one final opportunity for your fleet to withdraw with honor. We believe that the Kethran Empire, despite its reputation for conquest, consists of intelligent beings capable of recognizing when continued aggression serves no useful purpose." Ambassador Chen stepped closer to his camera, his eyes reflecting the same steel that Admiral Zexthor had seen in every human communication. "We also want to make something clear to both you and your High Command. This is not merely about one planet defending itself against one fleet. What we've built here represents humanity's commitment to freedom that extends beyond our own world. If the Kethran Empire chooses to continue its expansionist policies, they will eventually encounter other species who have learned from our example." The implications of those words struck Admiral Zexthor like a physical blow. The humans weren't just defending their own world, they were essentially declaring war on the entire concept of galactic conquest. "Are you threatening the Empire?" Supreme Marshal Kextan demanded from his own transmission. "We're informing the Empire," Ambassador Chen replied calmly. "Humanity has no desire for territorial expansion or galactic dominance. But we will actively support any species that chooses to resist conquest rather than submit to it. The era of easy conquest is ending, Marshal. The question is whether the Kethran Empire will adapt to this new reality or persist in policies that will ultimately lead to its destruction." "You speak boldly for a species that hasn't even left its home system," Grand Admiral Kexran interjected. "We speak honestly for a species that has chosen to stake everything on the principle that freedom is worth any sacrifice," Chen replied. "Admiral Zexthor, you have approximately 4 minutes to make your decision. We genuinely hope you choose wisdom over pride." The transmission from Earth ended, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Admiral Zexthor found himself caught between two forces that could reshape the galaxy: the traditional power of the Kethran Empire and the revolutionary defiance of a species that refused to be conquered. "Admiral," Supreme Marshal Kextan's voice cut through the silence, You have heard the human's words. What is your final recommendation? Admiral Zexthor looked around his bridge, seeing his officers and crew waiting for the decision that would determine their fate. These were good soldiers who had followed him through dozens of campaigns. Did he have the right to sacrifice their lives in pursuit of a conquest that would benefit no one? Sir, I recommend immediate withdrawal from this system. The tactical situation offers no reasonable prospect of success, and the strategic implications of our destruction would severely damage Imperial interests throughout this sector of the galaxy. You're asking me to authorize the first retreat in Imperial history, the Marshal replied. I'm asking you to authorize the preservation of our finest fleet for battles we can actually win. For long moments, silence stretched between the bridge of the Dominus Rex and the command centers of the Kethran Empire. Admiral Zexthor watched the countdown on his display approach the 2-minute mark, knowing that whatever decision came from High Command needed to come soon. Admiral, Supreme Marshal Kextan finally said, "You are authorized to withdraw the 7th Fleet to safe range. Once clear of the weapon's effective radius, you will establish a monitoring station and observe the human system for further developments." Understood, sir. What are long-term orders regarding this system? Unknown at this time. The High Command will need to reassess our policies regarding species of this type. Admiral Zexthor felt relief flood through him. For the first time in Imperial history, wisdom had triumphed over pride, and his fleet would live to fight another day. All ships, he commanded, turning toward his fleet communications officer, prepare for immediate withdrawal. Emergency acceleration to safe range. Maximum sustainable velocity. Sir, Commander Yexel asked quietly, should we transmit our intentions to the humans? Admiral Zexthor considered this carefully. The humans had honored their word regarding negotiations and deadlines. Perhaps it was time for the Kethran Empire to demonstrate that they too could act with honor. Open a channel to the human leadership, he ordered. Ambassador Chen appeared once more on the display, his expression showing cautious hope. Admiral, Ambassador, the Kethran 7th Fleet is beginning immediate withdrawal from your system. We will establish a monitoring station at safe range and report our findings to High Command. As of this moment, Earth is no longer considered a target for Imperial conquest. The relief on the ambassador's face was unmistakable. Admiral, on behalf of all humanity, I thank you for choosing wisdom. Will your Empire honor this decision? The Empire will need to develop new policies regarding species of your capabilities. That process may take time. We understand. Admiral, should your Empire ever wish to establish diplomatic relations based on mutual respect rather than conquest, humanity would be interested in such discussions. Admiral Zexthor felt something shift in his understanding of galactic politics. For 3 centuries, the Empire had defined strength as the ability to conquer. But the humans had demonstrated a different kind of strength, the power to resist conquest regardless of the cost. Perhaps such discussions may prove useful, Ambassador. For now, my fleet withdraws with honor intact. As do we all, Admiral. As do we all. The transmission ended just as the Dominus Rex began its acceleration away from Earth. Around the massive flagship, 300 warships turned their bows toward the outer system and began the first retreat in Kethran Imperial history. Behind them, a small blue world continued its ancient rotation, its surface peaceful and serene. But Admiral Zexthor now knew that beneath that deceptive calm lay the heart of something that would change the galaxy forever. Proof that some species would choose freedom over survival, and in doing so, redefine what it meant to be truly powerful among the stars. 3 months after the Kethran withdrawal, the galaxy hummed with unprecedented activity. News of humanity's successful defense had spread through the interstellar community like wildfire, carried by traders, diplomats, and intelligence networks that spanned dozens of civilizations. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a pre-spaceflight species had forced one of the major powers to retreat without firing a shot. Ambassador Chun Wei stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest achievement, the orbital diplomatic station New Geneva, positioned at the edge of Earth's gravity well. Through the reinforced transparent aluminum windows, he could see the steady stream of vessels arriving from across the galaxy. Ships bearing the emblems of the Altarian Federation, the Crystalline Collective, the Zephyrian Trade Consortium, and dozens of other civilizations that had previously shown little interest in the small blue world orbiting an unremarkable star. Status report. He requested from Captain Sarah Kim, the station commander. We currently have 37 vessels in holding patterns awaiting diplomatic clearance, Captain Kim replied, consulting her data tablet. The waiting list for formal meetings has extended to over 200 delegations, and we're receiving new requests for contact every day. Shin nodded, still somewhat amazed by the transformation that had occurred in humanity's galactic standing. 3 months ago, Earth had been an unknown backwater world that most species avoided or ignored. Today, it was arguably the most watched planet in the galaxy. Any word from our deep space monitoring stations? He asked. Dr. Vasquez reports that Project Sunburst remains fully operational but in standby mode. We can reactivate the weapon within 6 hours if necessary. Our early warning networks show normal traffic patterns throughout the system. No signs of hostile fleet movements. What about the Kethrin observation post? Captain Kim's expression grew thoughtful. That's actually interesting, sir. Admiral Zex Thor's monitoring station has been surprisingly cooperative. They've shared navigation data with visiting ships and even provided emergency assistance to a Zephyrian freighter that suffered engine failure last week. Shin raised an eyebrow at this information. The Kethrins were not known for their humanitarian instincts, particularly toward species they had previously considered targets for conquest. Perhaps their encounter with humanity had affected them more deeply than anyone had realized. Speaking of which, Captain Kim continued, Admiral Zex Thor has requested another meeting with you. 3rd time this month. What's his stated purpose? Same as before. He wants to discuss matters of mutual interest to our civilizations. His messages have been remarkably polite. Chun considered this carefully. The Kethrin admiral had indeed been unusually diplomatic in his communications, a far cry from the arrogant conqueror who had arrived in Earth's system 3 months earlier. The human leadership had agreed to limited communications with the Kethrin monitoring force, but formal diplomatic relations remained undefined. Schedule a meeting for tomorrow, Chun decided, but make it clear that we're speaking as equals, not as conqueror and conquered. Understood, sir. There's also the matter of the Tylonian delegation. They're requesting an immediate audience, and they seem agitated. Chun knew why the Tylonians were agitated. Their homeworld lay directly in the path of traditional Kethrin expansion routes, and they had been next on the Empire's list for conquest. The news that the 7th Fleet had been forced to withdraw had apparently caused significant political upheaval in their government. What's their specific request? They want to discuss mutual defense cooperation and technological exchange agreements. Reading between the lines, I think they want to know if we'll help them build their own version of Project Sunburst. This was the question that kept Chin awake at night. Dozens of species were making similar requests, all wanting access to the technology that had allowed humanity to successfully resist the galaxy's most powerful military force. The implications were staggering. If even half of these civilizations successfully developed planet-based superweapons, the entire balance of galactic power would shift overnight. Set up a meeting with the Tylonian delegation for this afternoon, he said, and make sure our policy briefing materials are up to date. We're going to be having this same conversation dozens of times in the coming weeks. Dr. Elena Vasquez materialized on the deck's holographic communication system, her image appearing with a slight shimmer that indicated transmission from Earth's surface. Chun, we need to talk, she said without preamble. I've been analyzing the data from our visitors' ships, and I'm seeing some concerning patterns. What kind of patterns? Several of the delegations have been conducting detailed scans of our orbital facilities. Very detailed. The kind of scans you'd run if you were trying to reverse engineer our defensive systems. Chun felt a chill run through him. This was exactly what humanity's leadership had feared, that their demonstration of superior defensive capabilities would make them a target for espionage and theft rather than respect and cooperation. Which civilizations? The hegemony of Nax, the Stellar Dominion, and this is the concerning one, three different groups that appear to be operating independently, but are using remarkably similar scanning techniques. I think someone's coordinating intelligence gathering efforts against us. Any threats to station security? Not direct threats, no. But, Chin, if hostile forces get enough data about our technology, they might find ways to counter it. Project Sunburst effectiveness depends partly on the unique physics involved. If someone develops specific countermeasures, she didn't need to finish the thought. Chin understood the implications perfectly. Humanity's great achievement could become their greatest vulnerability if other civilizations learned to defend against gravitational pulse weapons. Recommendations? We need to limit access to our facilities and be much more selective about who we allow into our system. And we need to start thinking about our next phase of development. What comes after proving we can't be conquered? Before Chin could respond, Captain Kim interrupted with an urgent tone. Ambassador, we're receiving a priority transmission from the outer system. The source signature matches the Kethrin High Command. Chun and Dr. Vasquez exchanged glances. Direct communication from the Kethrin Empire's leadership was unprecedented. Even Admiral Zex Thor's monitoring station reported through military channels rather than diplomatic ones. Put it through to the secure briefing room, Chin ordered. And alert the Secretary General. This could be significant. Minutes later, Chun found himself seated at a conference table facing the holographic image of Supreme Marshal Kextan himself. The ancient Kethrin's cybernetic eyes seemed to glow with particular intensity, and his formal military bearing suggested this was not a casual conversation. Ambassador Chun, the Marshal began, I am transmitting this communication with the full authority of the Kethrin High Command and the approval of the Imperial Council. We have proposals to discuss. I am listening, Marshal. The situation in this sector of the galaxy has become increasingly complex since our fleet's withdrawal from your system. Several civilizations have begun developing what they describe as defensive capabilities based on rumors and speculation about your Project Sunburst. Others have formed military alliances specifically intended to resist Imperial expansion. The Marshal paused, his expression showing something that Chun had never seen in a Kethrin before, uncertainty. Ambassador, for 3 centuries, the Kethrin Empire has maintained galactic stability through strength and the certainty of our military supremacy. Your species has disrupted that stability. The question now is whether we allow the galaxy to descend into chaos or work together to establish a new form of order. Chun felt the weight of history settling on his shoulders. The Kethrin Empire, the galaxy's dominant military power, was essentially asking humanity to help them maintain their position in a changing political landscape. What exactly are you proposing, Marshal? A formal alliance between the Kethrin Empire and Earth. We would guarantee your independence and provide military support against any hostile forces. In return, you would share your defensive technology with Imperial forces and assist us in maintaining stability in sectors where other species are beginning to challenge established order. The offer was breathtaking in its scope. Alliance with the Kethrins would instantly elevate humanity to the status of a major galactic power, providing access to technologies, trade routes, and diplomatic networks that would otherwise take centuries to develop. But it would also make Earth a target for every species in the galaxy that opposed Kethrin expansion. Marshal, I appreciate the significance of your offer, but I need to be clear about humanity's position. We developed Project Sunburst to defend our freedom, not to help other species maintain their dominance over weaker civilizations. I understand your concerns, Ambassador, but consider the alternative. Without stable authority structures, this sector of space could descend into warfare that would make our previous conquests seem benign by comparison. Multiple species developing superweapons without coordination or restraint could lead to conflicts that consume entire star systems. Chen realized that the Marshal was probably right. The genie was out of the bottle. Knowledge of gravitational pulse weapons was spreading throughout the galaxy, and there was no way to control how different civilizations would use that knowledge. What guarantees would we have that the Empire wouldn't simply use our technology to resume its expansion more efficiently? The same guarantee you demonstrated when you forced our withdrawal. The certainty that resistance to conquest is no longer futile. Your example has fundamentally changed the strategic calculus of galactic politics. The age of easy conquest is ending whether the Empire adapts or not. Before Chen could respond, Captain Kim's voice came through the communication system. Ambassador, we're receiving emergency transmissions from multiple sources. The Altarian Federation reports that the Stellar Dominion has just launched a preemptive strike against their outer colonies. They're claiming it's necessary to prevent the Altarians from developing planet-killer weapons. Dr. Vasquez's voice joined the conversation from Earth's surface. Chen, we're detecting massive energy buildups from 17 different star systems. It looks like multiple civilizations are attempting to activate weapons based on incomplete understanding of our technology. Supreme Marshal Kekstan's expression grew grimmer. Ambassador, it appears that the disruption of established order is proceeding faster than any of us anticipated. The galaxy may not have the luxury of extended negotiations. Chun felt the weight of impossible decisions pressing down on him. 3 months ago, his species had been an unknown civilization preparing to defend their homeworld. Now, they were being asked to help shape the future of galactic civilization itself. Marshal, I need to consult with my government before making any commitments. But I can say this, humanity is interested in galactic stability, but only if that stability is based on respect for the independence of all species rather than the dominance of a few. That may be the only viable path forward, the Marshal replied. Ambassador, I suggest we schedule formal negotiations as soon as possible. Current events indicate that we may not have much time to establish a new framework for galactic order before existing structures collapse entirely. The transmission ended, leaving Chun alone with his thoughts and the stunning realization that humanity's successful defense of Earth had triggered a galaxy-wide political transformation that was far from complete. Outside the station's windows, the ships of dozens of civilizations continued their patient orbits around the small blue world that had changed everything. Some came seeking alliance, others wanted technology, and still others hoped to understand how a pre-spaceflight species had managed to rewrite the rules of galactic politics overnight. But Chin knew that the real transformation was just beginning. The age of conquest was ending, but what would replace it remained to be determined. Humanity had proven that resistance was possible. Now they had to help ensure that the galaxy's new order would be worth the struggles that had brought it into being. The future of galactic civilization might well depend on the decisions made in the coming weeks by the representatives of a species that had chosen freedom over survival and, in doing so, had given hope to countless others who dreamed of the same choice 1 year after the Kethran withdrawal. The signing ceremony took place aboard the massive space station Concordia, positioned at the gravitational balance point between Earth and Luna. Representatives from 47 civilizations had gathered to witness the formal establishment of what historians would later call the Galactic Concordat, the first interstellar agreement based on principles of mutual defense and voluntary cooperation rather than conquest and submission. Ambassador Chan Wei stood at the central podium, looking out over an assembly that would have been unimaginable just 12 months earlier. Kethran military commanders sat beside Altarian diplomats. Crystalline collective emissaries shared tables with representatives from the Zephyrian Trade Consortium. Species that had been enemies for centuries were now working together to establish a new framework for galactic civilization. Delegates and representatives, Chen began, his words being simultaneously translated into dozens of languages and communication methods. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, but as equals committed to a vision of galactic society based on freedom, dignity, and mutual respect. The path to this moment had been neither smooth nor certain. The past year had seen three major interstellar conflicts as various civilizations attempted to use incomplete versions of gravitational pulse technology against their neighbors. The Stellar Dominion's attack on the Altarian Federation had triggered a cascade of violence that briefly threatened to engulf entire sectors of space. It was only the combined intervention of the Kethran Empire and humanity's newly formed Defense Corps that had prevented the conflict from escalating into galaxy-wide warfare. Admiral Zexthor's fleet, working in coordination with Earth's advanced sensor networks, had managed to broker ceasefires and establish neutral zones where negotiations could take place. The document we signed today, Chun continued, represents more than just a treaty between civilizations. It represents a fundamental commitment to the principle that no species has the right to impose its will upon another through force alone. Dr. Elena Vasquez watched the ceremony from the observation deck, her attention divided between the historic proceedings and the data streaming to her tablet from monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. Project Sunburst had been successfully replicated by 7 different civilizations, each with their own modifications and improvements. The knowledge that had been humanity's ultimate secret was now spreading rapidly through networks of allied species. But rather than creating the chaos that many had feared, the proliferation of superweapon technology was actually bringing stability to galactic politics. When multiple civilizations possess the ability to destroy entire fleets, the cost of aggressive conquest became prohibitively high. War hadn't ended, but the nature of conflict was changing from conquest to more limited objectives. Dr. Vasquez came a voice behind her. She turned to see Admiral Zexthor approaching, his formal diplomatic uniform replacing the battle armor she had first seen him wearing during their initial confrontation. "Admiral," she replied, noting how much the Kethran leader had changed over the past year. The arrogant conqueror had been replaced by a thoughtful strategist who seemed genuinely committed to finding alternatives to military force. "I wanted to thank you personally," he said, his translated words carrying an emotion that would have been impossible to imagine from a Kethran military commander just 1 year earlier. "Thank me? For what?" "For showing my people that there was another way forward." For 3 centuries, the Empire had defined strength as the ability to defeat enemies. You've demonstrated that true strength comes from the ability to defend what matters most, even at the cost of everything else. Dr. Vasquez studied the alien commander carefully. "Admiral, what you're describing sounds more like wisdom than strength. Perhaps that's the lesson we needed to learn." He gestured toward the main assembly where the ceremony continued. "The Empire has voted to transform our military doctrine from conquest to defense. Instead of expanding our territory, we'll be helping other species develop their own defensive capabilities. And your people are accepting this change. Not all of them, but enough. The younger generation especially understands that the galaxy has fundamentally changed. The old ways of thinking are simply no longer viable when any determined species can develop weapons capable of destroying entire fleets." Down in the main assembly, Supreme Marshal Kextan was approaching the podium for his address. The ancient Kethran leader moved slowly, his cybernetic enhancements gleaming under the station's artificial lighting, but his presence still commanded absolute attention from the gathered delegates. "Honored representatives," he began, his voice carrying the authority of centuries of military command.